Hello, good afternoon. I'm Parthasarathi Vaidya. I'm one of the panelists for this conference, but unfortunately, I'm away from Mysore for some personal reasons, so I couldn't attend in person. That's why you will be hearing what I have to say through a recording. I am a psychotherapist, a counselor, and I also consider myself someone who facilitates really deep healing and shifting in the lives, personalities, and identities of people who need my assistance. And as such, the theme of this conference is extremely important to me. In my practice as a therapist, I have worked with a significant number of people who are on a journey of breaking the mold of what their society and culture deem appropriate, um, in terms of who they can be, who they are allowed to be. Now, it's very evident to all of us that society has a certain set of expectations. It is a stable system in which everyone has a certain role, everyone is expected to behave in a certain way, and this is done so that its current state, its status quo, and its level of development in the evolution of civilization can stay stable. And the question of identity and identification is deeply and often insidiously important to the fabric of society because it is deeply invested in ascribing these roles to people. So, for example, how a person is to operate in a collective is often defined by what they identify as, what their traits are. And the most basic bifurcation that we can see is between quote unquote male and female. Now, all of you are healthcare practitioners, you are studying to be physicians and medical doctors. And I understand that male and female across history have had have been defined as those who biologically have male sex organs or female sex organs, which is to say penis and testes or a vulva, vagina, and uterus. And I'm sorry if I'm missing other things in the grouping. Now, yes, as doctors, those definitions are important to you. But in calling someone a man or a woman, on one hand, it is a medical definition. But on the other hand, those words carry the weight, the baggage of what it means to be a man or a woman in the cultural fabric that your patient exists in. And yes, growing up, we are conditioned and socialized to fit into these labels of being a boy or a girl, being a man or a woman, and that becomes a part of our mental model of the world. And for the most part, as people are normative, as in, if you see a bell curve statistically, most people will fall into the norm and they are probably happy with the conditioning that is handed down to them. They are happy with the identities that they have been given. However, as any statistician will know, all phenomena are kind of a bell curve, and every bell curve has outliers. It has deviance from the mean. And as such, human beings are also deviants from the mean in many ways from the society and cultural fabric that they belong to. And every human being has an ability to observe and analyze their own internal state. It is a process that we call interoception. They can internally understand whether how something feels. They can understand their own perception of temperature and how it applies to them. Or they can be a little bit more abstract and say that I feel there is a lot of pressure on me. Or they can say that I have a gut feeling that I shouldn't do this. So we basically have an awareness of whether something is right for us or wrong for us. And in the same way, we know when someone is perceiving us to be different from what we are. They have certain expectations of us that we don't really identify with. And this is very evident when it comes to being a queer person with having a queer identity. This is queer insofar as not ascribing or subscribing to the roles, especially the gender and sexual orientation based roles that your cultural fabric expects from you. And when I talk about a process of identification, I mean that when we identify as something, we behave in such a way as to confirm our idea of ourselves as having that trait or having that label. And this should instantly tell you that it's not just another thing that you call yourself. It has a very real impact on how you behave. And whether you are perceived to have a certain identity or not will define whether you feel comfortable in having certain expectations placed on you, whether you will feel congruent in doing the kind of things that you identify with. And if your idea of who you are and society's idea of who you are do not align, then there will be a constant friction between what you are doing, and when people see you as behaving in a way that doesn't make sense to their idea of your identity, they will consider you deviant. And in general, so far, historically, society ostracizes deviance. They consider deviance somehow a threat to the fabric of society. And this brings me to the point of my speech, which is to implore you as healthcare practitioners to be more sensitive to a person's own perception of who they are. You could argue that it doesn't really matter for you to be able to do your job that the male and female categories that the medical textbooks have propounded for so long are diagnostically useful. They let you do your job properly. And yes, while that is true objectively in terms of your practice, I would say that as people who are in a power dynamic of being caretakers of the patients who come to you, I would really suggest, as a psychologist, as somebody who constantly deals with the suffering that is wrought on people because of not being treated as who they believe themselves to be, it is important for the next generation of doctors to be really sensitive to their patients' perceptions of who they are. And in order to approach this issue in a much more honest and self-reflective way, I think this requires each and every one of us to investigate our idea of reality itself and of cultural evolution. Because if you really see the mechanics of how a society evolves, there are two forces. There is a force that is concerning itself with keeping the status quo alive, which is the more traditional or conservative vector in which the force is propagated. And then there is the more left leaning direction of the society's evolution, where there is an expansion, there is an allowance for people to behave in different ways. There is an openness to the idea that what is today can change into something else entirely tomorrow, and there is nothing really wrong with that. Whereas the opposite direction, in its own way, for good reason, concerns itself with being more rigid, with solidifying cultural phenomena such that systems that have worked in the past can continue to work. People can behave in ways that are predictable, that maximize the efficiency of the culture's goals, and basically keep everyone happy. And in order for evolution to occur, there have to be mutations, and these mutations have to somehow find their way back into the species and be considered a part of the collective of the species. And as such, as time moves forward, the definition of what that species changes or evolves. And yes, this, and if you want to know how this relates to your practice as doctors, it's really important to investigate whether you hold space for people's individual experiences and their individual identities, such that you know that allowing this and holding space for this is leading to a certain step step in the evolution of the society and culture that you belong to. Can you hold space for people to deviate? And just like all human beings, you yourselves as individuals need life around you to make sense, right? You have a certain idea of how people should be, of how society is made up. You have a sense of reality. And when anything interferes with that sense of reality, of how things should be, it causes suffering in you. It causes distress in you because there is a certain suspicion that what I believe could be a lie, and things may not work the way that they do. Things may not work the way I believe they do, and this time and time again has been found to cause people to act out. Now, can you hold space if you are okay? Let's say even now you are on board with holding space for people to be divergent. That is one facet. Maybe later on in your own time stream, there will be a different kind of deviance that you may not be able to accommodate, or that you may not be prepared to accommodate. But can you hold space for yourself to continue to be wrong, to for your idea of reality to not be completely correct, and be ready to accommodate other people's experiences as honest and correct within themselves, because they have the interoception, the ability to know what feels right to them, regardless of whether it fits into your idea of reality or not. I kind of keep hammering on about the way that society works because this has very real ramifications in the lives of people who are not normative. Because it is society is a stable system that wants to maintain its equilibrium. It wants to stay in the state that it is. Anybody that tries to break the mold is in a way made to suffer. They are either beaten into coming back into the fold, or they are ostracized, they are removed so that the status quo can be kept. And because of that, I think as healthcare practitioners, all of us have a big choice to make on which side of that dichotomy we fall on. Do we invite people in, and do we say that we are part of the process of bringing you in despite your mutation so that you can be a part of the evolution of what we are doing? Or will I cause you more suffering and cause you more disconnection? And this is why I feel that as healthcare practitioners, all of us owe it to the people who come to us to become more sensitive to who they believe themselves to be. Because it's not really a joke to them. It's not just another thing that they are identifying as or labeling themselves to be. It is an actual phenomenological entity that they attach to themselves that has a real impact on whether they feel comfortable in their bodies or not. And as healthcare practitioners, are we equipped within our own value system to accommodate that? That's what brings me to my overarching point, which is not about whether you follow procedure and accept queer affirmative and queer tolerant codes and protocols of being doctors, being physicians, being practitioners. It's more about, is your own mindset shifting in such a way that it can allow your patients to be who they are, so that you can support them on their journey regardless of whether they know who they are or not, whether they have arrived at a conclusive idea of their identity, even if they are in a constant process. Can you simply allow them to be, instead of subconsciously and insidiously forcing them to fit a definition because it makes you more comfortable. Because at the end of the day, it's always about the patient's health, it's always about the patient healing. And on that note, I know I went on for a while, and the video format kind of messed with my ability to put my points across. I hope what I said made some amount of sense, and the things that I gave you as food for thought help you optimize your process as practicing physicians. Thank you and have a good day.